The morning air was cold and dry when Jack Monroe tightened the worn straps of his delivery vest and approached the dispatch station. Day 8. Job 8. His body was sore, but it was the kind of pain that reminded him he was still trying. The warehouse buzzed with early movement. Vans lining up, drivers grabbing coffee, barcode scanners beeping like crickets. A laminated schedule was taped beside a dusty vending machine. Jack's name was scrawled beside Route 14B, Team Up, Lynn Tran. He turned to look for the name and found her before she found him. A petite woman in a gray windbreaker, hair tied back messily, crouched beside an aging delivery van. She was taping a broken taillight with clear plastic wrap. 3 kids sat in the back seat, bundled in oversized jackets. The oldest, maybe 10, held a sandwich and was helping the youngest wipe jelly off her face with a napkin. "Jack?" she asked, rising quickly, brushing her hands on her jeans. "That's me," he nodded. "I'm Lynn. We're on 14B today. Hope you don't mind, kids. My sitter canceled, again." He glanced at the van, then at her tired but alert eyes. "I've seen worse company." She cracked a smile, brief but real. By 7:30 a.m., they were already cruising down narrow streets lined with mailboxes and cracked sidewalks. Lynn drove with practiced urgency, one hand on the wheel, the other flipping through printed delivery orders clipped to the dashboard. "I've been running this route for 4 years, she said. "Not many do it with kids in the car, but this job's the only one that pays daily, and I don't exactly get child support." Jack didn't ask more. Her tone wasn't defensive, just factual. The baby in the back began to hum tunelessly while drawing on a fogged window. Jack passed Lynn a granola bar from the glove box labeled emergency snacks in Sharpie. "You always bring them along?" She nodded. "Unless someone magically offers free childcare for 3 kids under 11. Jack blinked. That wasn't sarcasm, it was survival. By noon, they had delivered to 53 addresses. Apartments, duplexes, a senior center, and a bakery where the owner pressed a bag of leftover bagels into Lynn's hands for the little ones. "They know you," Jack observed. She shrugged. "They know the kids." He watched her from the passenger seat. She worked like a soldier under pressure. Fast, focused, no wasted motion. But there was grace in it, too, the kind only learned through years of doing what no one else could or would do for you. When they pulled up to a large suburban house with a landscaped lawn, Lynn hesitita. "Don't judge me, but I get nervous in these places, like I'm delivering more than a package. Like they can smell I'm not from here." Jack stayed quiet. He remembered that feeling from another life, walking into embassies or upscale operations in uniform, boots still caked in sand. The front door opened before she rang. A man in a pressed polo shirt took the box and handed her a tip with barely a glance. As they drove off, the baby began to cry. "Juice?" the oldest asked. Lynn reached into a cooler and handed over a small plastic bottle. "Drink slow, baby. We got 3 hours left." They stopped for a 10-minute break in a grocery store parking lot. Lynn popped the back hatch open. The kids spilled out, stretching, giggling, chasing one another between the faded lines of the empty spaces. Jack leaned against the van. "How do you do it?" She looked up. "Do what?" "All of it." Her lips pressed into a line. "I don't think about it as all. Just the next thing. The next box. The next stop. The next meal." She pulled out a zippered pouch. Inside, small sticky notes with handwritten reminders. Rent due Friday. Tony's doctor visit. Call Ms. Reyes about school lunches. Jack read them with an odd reverence, as if they were prayers scribbled by someone who believed in things too stubbornly to give up. "I used to clean floors in a high school. Got let go after I was showing too much. Guess swollen ankles don't go with wax tile." She smirked without bitterness. "That when you started deliveries?" 2 days after I gave birth to Lily. I strapped her to me and kept going." Jack stared at her. "No medals. No applause. Just raw endurance." They finished their lunch, cold rice balls Lynn had packed at 4:00 a.m. and climbed back into the van. One of the final stops of the day was a weathered apartment complex with chipping paint and stairwells that smelled like mildew. Lynn took the box and climbed 3 floors with Jack behind her. "This one's for a woman with a broken hip. She won't answer, but she's in there. You'll hear the TV." They left the box by the door. As they turned to leave, Jack said, "You know every one of these people, don't you?" Lynn hesitated at the landing. "I don't know their names, but I know how it feels to wait for something. Anything. That means someone remembered you." When they got back in the van, the youngest was asleep with her head on her brother's lap. The middle child had used a phone to take blurry pictures of the clouds. Jack looked in the rearview mirror and caught the youngest girl's eyes just before they closed. She didn't flinch. She looked right through him. And somehow that did more to unravel him than any battlefield. As the sun dipped below the rooftops and long shadows stretched over cracked pavement, Jack scribbled something in his notebook. "Some jobs are just about moving packages. Others, they're about moving people." By the 3rd day working with Lynn, Jack stopped counting the number of steps they took or the number of stairs he climbed. Delivery work was deceptively demanding. Not just physically, but emotionally. Every door told a different story. Some were warm and welcoming. Some slammed shut before a word was spoken. But what never changed was Lynn. She moved with quiet precision, maneuvering her aging van through tight alleys, slamming on brakes when kids chased balls across driveways, muttering to herself in half Vietnamese, half English. The kids in the back knew the routine. Hold the package, wait for mom to park, then sit still until she came back. By midday, they delivered to a row of brick townhouses, a rehab clinic, and a hair salon where the staff gave Lynn a small plastic bag of sample shampoos. "For your princesses," they smiled. As they pulled away, Jack said, "You're like a regular on this circuit." Lynn shrewd. "Consistency is all you have when you're broke. I never missed a shift. Not even the day I found out about the tumor in my mom's lung. I drove, cried, and delivered." Jack looked over. "She's still around?" Lynn shook her head. "Past 2 years ago. She used to say, 'You ain't gotta be strong all the time. Just don't let the kids see you break.' So I saved the breakdowns for the laundry room." They shared a silence only 2 tired people could understand. Later that afternoon, Lynn slowed the van in front of a crumbling office building with boarded-up windows and graffiti on the side. She parked. "This used to be my second job," she said softly. "Night janitor. 3 hours a night after the kids went to bed. I lost it when I got too pregnant to climb stairs." Jack followed her out of the van. "What happened after that?" "I cried for exactly 1 hour. Then I signed up to drive for a delivery app that same night. My bank account had $4.16 in it. I couldn't wait for anyone to save me." Jack thought back to the first few weeks after his discharge. He had waited for something, someone, any sign that the world still had a place for him. He'd received none. Maybe that was why he had started this journey. Or maybe it was why this woman, this relentless, unbreakable mother, felt so familiar. As they approached the door, a neighbor shouted down from the window, "Hey Lynn, you still gonna make pho this weekend?" Lynn waved. "If I don't collapse first." The neighbor chuckled and disappeared inside. "You really are a local legend," Jack said. "I just show up. Every day. That's more than most people do." Back in the van, the kids were listening to an audiobook about dinosaurs. The baby clapped when the narrator roared like a T-Rex. "You don't use daycare?" Jack asked as they pulled into another neighborhood. "I used to, but I couldn't afford it after the rent hike. So I started bringing them along. They learned real quick how to sit still, how to be quiet, how to read a delivery slip." Jack looked at the little boy in the back, holding a clipboard with childlike seriousness. "Your kids are sharp. They didn't get a choice." The next delivery was at a retirement home. As Jack walked the box up the ramp, Lynn whispered, "Watch out for Ms. Bertram. She'll flirt with you and then ask you to fix her Wi-Fi." Jack chuckled, and sure enough, Ms. Bertram did both. As the afternoon waned, the sky dimmed with heavy clouds. They stopped for a 5-minute break at a park. The kids ran in circles, chasing one another on the damp grass. Jack sat on the edge of the van with a peanut butter sandwich. "You ever get tired?" he asked. "All the time," Lynn replied. "But I can't afford to let it stop me." She pointed at her phone, showing him her delivery goals. 100 stops this week equals bonus plus $50 grocery card. "That card feeds us for 3 days," she said. "It's not much, but it means a hot dinner." Jack thought of all the meals he'd left untouched back at the base when grief, shame, or guilt choked his appetite. "You ever dream of doing something else?" Lynn looked at the sky. "I wanted to be a teacher once. Thought I'd read books with little kids in a bright classroom. But life had a different curriculum in mind." Her voice didn't carry bitterness, just truth. She glanced at the kids, now picking flowers and building a pile of muddy sticks. "But you know something? I think I still teach every day. I teach them how to fight, how to love, how to not give up." Jack looked at her with something close to awe. He'd met commanders, politicians, billionaires, but no one had ever made survival look this graceful. They packed up, the baby falling asleep again in the car seat. The next few deliveries were uneventful. Another gated home with a Ring doorbell, a grocery drop-off for an elderly couple, and a small bookstore where Lynn exchanged a laugh with the owner and picked up a used paperback. "Free for loyal customers," the woman said. "Your girl likes fairy tales, right?" Lynn nodded, eyes soft. "Yeah, and she deserves at least one." The day was nearly done when a sudden rainstorm struck. Wipers screeched against the windshield as Lynn pulled over under an overpass. In the back seat, the kids were half asleep, lulled by the sound. Jack turned to Lynn. "Do you ever take a break?" "For you." She smiled gently. "This is my break. Being on the road. Having purpose. It's the one time I don't feel like I'm drowning." He understood that too well. Jack looked outside. The streetlights flickered on, illuminating the shimmering puddles and the quiet hush that followed heavy rain. They didn't talk for a few minutes, just sat there, breathing in the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Jack wrote something in his notebook, just one line this time. "Some people chase dreams. Others carry them, with 3 children in the back seat." The rain hadn't let up. By early evening, the streets glistened like mirrors, reflecting headlights and tail lights in fractured lines. Jack sat stiffly in the passenger seat, rubbing his knee. It had been aching since the last staircase, but he didn't mention it. Lynn looked more worn than he did, and that was saying something. The van creaked as it made a left turn. The kids in the back were uncharacteristically quiet, half asleep, tired from the long day. Then Lynn's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Her face tightened. She swerved to the side and threw the van into park. "It's the school," she muttered, already answering. "Yes." "What? Wait. What happened?" Jack sat up straighter, alert. Lynn's knuckles turned white as she gripped the steering wheel with her free hand. "Which arm? Is he crying? Is he alone?" Okay. I'm coming. I'm on my way now." She hung up and took a shaky breath. "Tony, my oldest, fell during gym. They think his arm's broken." "Which school?" Jack asked immediately. "Marion Elementary. It's 15 minutes from here, but I can't drive in this rain with this van. The brakes, they lock up when it's slick. I've skidded before." Jack scanned the map on her dashboard GPS. "I'll go," he said. "I'll drive. You take care of him. I'll finish these last 6 drops and meet you back at the house." She looked at him, blinking hard. "No. I can't ask you." "You didn't. I volunteered." She hesitated, torn between panic and pride, then nodded. "The orders are in sequence," she said, her voice trembling. "On the clipboard. Watch out for number 5, apartment 3C. The tenant doesn't like men delivering. Had a bad incident before." Jack nodded, already sliding into the driver's seat. She unbuckled the kids and kissed each one on the forehead, whispering instructions. "Lily, you stay quiet for Uncle Jack. Okay? Max, you be brave for your sister." Jack watched as Lynn, soaked in seconds, sprinted across the lot into the rain and disappeared into the misty blur of headlights. For a moment, the van was quiet, save for the rain tapping the roof like anxious fingers. Jack gripped the wheel, took a deep breath, and turned the ignition. The delivery app blinked online. 6 orders left. 2 hours to deadline. He started driving. The first stop was a nursing home. Jack carried a medium-sized box through a winding corridor, passing frail hands on wheelchairs and kind eyes that seemed to recognize something in him. He left the package on a table beside a chessboard and a window with raindrops streaming like tears. Back in the van, Max asked, "Is my mom mad?" Jack shook his head. "She's worried, but she's strong." Max didn't speak again. He just held Lily's hand in silence. The second delivery was smoother, a suburban house with a dry porch. The man who answered was confused to see a stranger instead of Lynn, but nodded when Jack explained. "She your partner?" the man asked. Jack considered the word. "Yeah, for today she is." By the time he reached the 5th stop, apartment 3C, his nerves were frayed. He climbed the narrow staircase, mindful of the warning Lynn had given. He knocked gently and stepped back. A cautious voice responded. "Who is it?" "Delivery for Ms. Jenkins," Jack said calmly. There was a long pause. Then the door creaked open an inch. A woman in her 60s peeked through. "You're not the usual girl." "No, ma'am. She had a family emergency. I'm filling in." Something about his tone seemed to soften her. She took the package through the crack and whispered, "Tell her thank you. I remember what it was like, raising them alone." Jack gave her a small smile. "I'll let her know." Back in the van, the final delivery took them across town. Jack's body throbbed. His mind flashed back to his own son, long gone now, and the days when he too had driven through storms to reach him. Days when he failed. But tonight he wasn't failing. Not this time. By 8:40 p.m., Jack pulled the van into Lynn's small gravel driveway. Her apartment glowed faintly through the rain, one upstairs window lit. The kids were both asleep now. Lily curled into Max's chest like a kitten. Jack didn't wake them. He sat quietly, drenched in sweat and rainwater, watching the ripples of water on the windshield. 10 minutes later, the door swung open and Lynn rushed outside, umbrella in hand. She opened the van and exhaled in relief when she saw the kids sleeping peacefully. Jack stepped out. "How's Tony?" Lynn wiped her eyes and gave a shaky laugh. "Hairline fracture. They wrapped it." He was more scared about missing recess than the pain. She looked at him, water sliding down her cheeks. You finished the route? All done. No broken packages, no bad reviews." "You didn't have to." "I know," Jack said. They carried the kids upstairs together. The apartment was warm but small. 2 mattresses pushed together on one side of the room, hand-drawn art taped to the walls, and a small space heater humming in the corner. Jack helped lay the kids down, then stood for a moment, not wanting to intrude, but also not ready to leave. Lynn returned from checking on Tony in the other room. She handed Jack a towel. He took it and dried his hair, standing in the cramped kitchen. "I owe you more than thanks," she whispered. "No, you don't," he replied. Today wasn't about owing. It was about showing up. She looked at him, eyes glistening. "Most people don't. I used to be one of them," he admitted. She opened a tin can of soup and poured it into 2 mugs. They drank in silence. Outside, the rain finally began to die down. Jack later wrote in his journal that night, "Some days ask you to give everything you have without warning, without glory. And sometimes, you do it not because you're a hero, but because someone else has carried that burden longer than you, and it's your damn turn to carry it for them." Jack hadn't expected to see the inside of Lynn's apartment. He'd imagined it a few times during long rides in the van, maybe a cluttered but cozy space, something with a lived-in warmth. What he stepped into was smaller than he expected, tighter, but somehow more vast in meaning. The door creaked as they entered. Lynn turned on a single standing lamp near the futon, its warm glow painting the room in honey-colored light. The kids darted to their usual corners. The eldest went straight to a stack of schoolwork. The middle one pulled out markers and a coloring book. The youngest climbed into a soft nest of blankets near the wall and curled up with a plastic pony. The whole apartment was barely 400 square feet. 2 mattresses on the floor took up the bedroom behind a half-closed curtain. A fold-out table doubled as a desk and dining spot. Clothes hung on a line strung across the kitchen area. The smell of baby powder, stale coffee, and something sweet, perhaps jasmine, lingered in the air. "This is it," Lynn said, as if apologizing. Jack shook his head slowly. "It's more than a lot of people have." Lynn gave him a tired smile. "It's small, but it's mine. No shared walls with anyone shouting. No landlords who ignore mold. Just quiet. Most nights." Jack sat on a crate beside the door and took it all in. On the wall near the light switch, taped at a child's eye level, were dozens of drawings. Some were just stick figures. Others were surprisingly intricate. Dragons, rainbows, trees, all signed Mai in careful crayon. "She draws when she's scared," Lynn said, noticing his gaze. "Or happy. Or both." He nodded. "That's how a lot of soldiers write." Lynn looked at him. "You were in the military, right? Army. 10 years. Do you miss it?" He hesitated. "Not the orders. Not the sand or the noise. But I miss knowing who I was every morning." Lynn sat down across from him, her hands cradling a chipped mug of tea. "I miss knowing I could give my kids something better," she whispered. Jack didn't speak. He let the silence hold space for the weight of that truth. Lynn took a deep breath and leaned back. "The man I was with, their father, he left when I was pregnant with Lily. Said he needed to find himself. I guess he's still looking." Jack's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I worked 2 jobs. Did night shifts, took surveys online for grocery money. Some nights I didn't sleep at all." "You ever cry so hard your body doesn't have any water left?" Jack nodded slowly. "Yeah, more than once." She glanced toward the bedroom. "There were nights I wanted to give up. I mean really give up. But every time, one of them would reach for me. Like they knew." Jack's voice was soft. "They probably did." She smiled again. "This one more painful. You know what's funny? No one talks about the loneliness of motherhood. Especially this kind. You become invisible. Not tragic enough for charity. Not stable enough for support." Jack looked around the room again, at the little piles of books, the repaired toys, the handmade schedule taped to the fridge. "Looks like you've made a home out of a battlefield." Lynn Belinket, then laughed. A small, grateful sound. "That's the best compliment I've had in years." A few minutes passed. Jack pulled out the final delivery package he'd forgotten to drop off. He handed it to her. "Thought this one was yours. Found it under the front seat." Lynn opened the plain cardboard box carefully. Inside was a small hardback book, The Giving Tree. Tucked between the pages was a handwritten note. "For the strongest mother I've ever met. You deliver more than packages, you deliver courage. Every single day. Mr. Lee." Lynn covered her mouth, her eyes suddenly wet. Jack looked away, giving her space. "I've brought him deliveries for 3 years," she said, voice cracking. "I never thought he even noticed me." "People notice," Jack said. "Some just don't say it out loud." She placed the book gently on the table like it might break, then turned to him. "You okay staying a few more minutes?" He nodded. "Of course." She walked over to the kitchen and pulled out a pot, began heating up some leftover rice and beans. "It's not gourmet," she said. "It's perfect." They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that feels earned. The children slowly drifted off, one by one, until the only sound left in the room was the soft hum of the fridge and the ticking of an old plastic clock. Before Jack left, Lynn handed him something wrapped in a paper towel. "I make these for the kids. Peanut butter oat bites. They keep your hands busy when your heart's tired." He held the small treat in his palm. "Thank you." At the door, Lynn looked at him again. "Most people think delivering packages is about getting from point A to B. But sometimes, it's about showing up when someone's breaking. Just being there." Jack nodded. "I think you've been doing both for a long time." And then he stepped into the night, his heart heavier, fuller. In his notebook, he scribbled before the ink could smear. She said she wasn't strong, but she lifts 3 lives every single day. I've carried guns and gear, but I've never carried anything as heavy as that kind of love. The next morning began the way most delivery days did, early, hurried, and loaded with the silent math of time, gas mileage, and patience. But something was different now. Jack couldn't quite name it, but he felt it in the way he adjusted the rearview mirror to check on the kids, or how he moved to the back of the van without being asked, anticipating Lynn's system. They were no longer strangers trading favors. They were a team. By noon, the van was 2/3 empty, and Lynn finally exhaled for the first time all morning. "No school's calling yet," she said. "It's a good day." Jack chuckled. "I think that qualifies as a win." They pulled up to a familiar old house, one Jack recognized from the day before. The porch was decorated with bird feeders and wind chimes. "Mr. Lee's place. I think he's expecting this," Lynn said, retrieving a small brown box with a discreet return label. As she walked to the door, Jack waited in the van. She knocked twice. Mr. Lee opened the door slowly. His eyes lit up. "Back again. You forgot this in your previous order," Lynn said. "Looks like a return item." The old man chuckled and waved her inside. "Come in. I'll show you something." Jack watched through the windshield, the van still idling. 10 minutes passed. Then Lynn returned with something different in her hands. She held a small, framed photograph of a woman in a nurse's uniform, smiling beside a Christmas tree. The frame was old, the glass cracked in the corner. "He gave me this," she said, holding it carefully. "That's his wife. She passed a few years ago. Said she was the one who always believed in small acts of kindness. He told me. He sees her in me." Jack blinked. "That's a lot." Lynn nodded, her fingers tightening around the frame. "I didn't even know he remembered my name." "They always remember," Jack said softly. "They just don't always have the words." She looked at him for a long time. "I've delivered hundreds of packages," she said. "But this is the first time I felt like I was the one being given something." They sat in the van for a while, the photo on the dashboard catching soft light. Outside, a pair of birds fought over seeds scattered on the porch railing. Inside, Jack watched Lynn cradle something fragile. Not just in her hands, but in her chest. "I used to think this job was just about surviving," she whispered. "But maybe it's also about being seen, even just once." Jack didn't answer. He didn't have to. He thought back to the nights he spent waiting for meaning to knock on his own door. It never had. But here, now, he was watching someone else's meaning unfold in real time, like a slow sunrise across a broken window. They moved on. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. Deliveries to routine addresses. A few grumpy customers. A teenager who tipped Lynn with a sticker sheet. A woman who asked if they could carry a box to her porch steps because her back was out. Lynn did it without a word. But Jack noticed her posture was different now. Her shoulders weren't slumped from the weight of the day. She walked like someone who had finally been acknowledged. That evening, Jack stood beside the van as Lynn buckled her youngest into a car seat. "Hey," he said, just before she closed the door. "You ever think about writing down your story?" She raised an eyebrow. "Why would anyone read it?" "Because people think they're alone," he said. "Until someone like you reminds them they're not." She looked away, visibly blinking back emotion. "Maybe one day." Jack handed her a slip of paper. On it was a number and the name of a friend, someone he'd met through a local writing workshop for veterans and working-class parents. "They run a free program. No pressure. Just think about it." Lynn folded the paper and tucked it into her wallet. "You're full of surprises, Jack. Only the good kind." She smirked. "We'll see." As the van pulled away, Jack stayed on the curb, watching the taillights disappear into the glow of early evening. The next entry in his notebook came easily. Sometimes the smallest deliveries carry the heaviest truths. Today she received more than a package. And I received more than a paycheck. I saw someone remember that they mattered. The final shift of the week began with a strange calm. No rain. No broken engines. No emergency calls. Just golden morning light sifting through trees, and the familiar rumble of the delivery van rattling down uneven pavement. Jack rode shotgun, arms folded, eyes scanning the houses as they passed. The van, despite its creaks and dents, now felt oddly like a second home. Lynn hummed quietly to a Vietnamese lullaby playing on low volume. The children, all three, were quieter than usual. Even the youngest held a small book instead of babbling. "You ever wonder," Jack asked softly, "how you got here?" Lynn glanced at him. "Every single night. But then I remember it doesn't matter how. What matters is what I do now that I'm here." Jack nodded. That sounded like something a soldier would say. They were nearing the end of the route when Lynn pulled the van into a narrow alley behind a bakery. "One last drop before break," she said, hopping out. Jack stayed behind. He opened his notebook, flipping to an empty page. But he didn't write. Instead, he stared at the kids in the mirror. The boy had fallen asleep against the window. The older girl was gently stroking her sister's hair. It struck Jack then, how much grace could live in a small space, when people made room for one another. He was still staring when Lynn returned. She held 2 paper bags, the tops folded neatly. "Bonus from the bakery lady," she said, handing him one. "Banana muffins. Still warm." Jack took it and sat there for a moment before speaking. "Do your kids know how much you've given up for them?" Lynn smiled, but it wasn't a happy one. "I hope they never have to understand it. That's the goal." She turned serious. "I've been thinking, maybe I should cut a few hours each week. Sign up for that writing thing you mentioned. Just try, even if it's bad." Jack grinned. "That's how most great things start." She looked down, then back up. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me," she said. "Not as someone desperate, but someone trying." Jack felt something shift inside his chest. A quiet crack where light got in. That night, Lynn invited him to dinner. It wasn't fancy. Rice, sautéed greens, leftover chicken. The table was a folding card table. The cups were mismatched. The conversation was slow, warm, and full of laughter that seemed to surprise everyone. After dinner, while the kids cleaned up, Jack helped Lynn fold laundry. She handed him a pair of baby socks, barely bigger than his thumb. "I almost gave up when Lily was this size," she admitted. "I was living in a shelter. Everything felt like too much." But then she started smiling in her sleep. "And I thought, if she can dream, maybe I can too." Jack swallowed hard. "You ever think of what life might be like 10 years from now?"
Linh chút cơ.
"Hopefully quieter. Less ramen. More sleep." He looked at her then. Not just at the exhaustion she wore, but the strength stitched into every movement, every breath. "You've built something real," he said. "I've built survival," she corrected, still hoping it turns into a life. Before he left, she pressed something into his hand. A hand-drawn picture by her daughter Mai. It was a crude but recognizable drawing. Jack standing beside the delivery van, with a sun above his head and birds flying in the background. Below it, the words in shaky but clear handwriting. "Uncle Jack brings good people home." He didn't say a word, just nodded, throat tight. Outside, the night air was cool. The world felt a little softer than before. He sat on the steps for a while, looking up at the stars. When he finally opened his notebook, he wrote slowly, carefully,